All right, and welcome to the Balance. It's a Sunday drop. It's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everyone out there who's a mother and a father who fills that role. Which is why we're not going to have a lot of other drops over the weekend because it is Mother's Day weekend. But we did want to have an opportunity. We were out at the track, out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway yesterday. We caught up with Tony Donahue as well, who's going to join us here, the Tony Donahue, the Tony D podcast and Unverified. Exciting day throughout the entire day yesterday, Tony. I do want to get to the Grand Prix here, or Grand Prix, or Grand Prix, however you say it. I do want to get to that in a minute, but I want to talk about how exciting was it to see Dan Weldon's son in a race and hit the podium. I mean, how exciting was the pole? Everything leading up to the race was really exciting, and then we had just a total disaster with the race. So we'll get to that secondary, but of course, a lot of stuff was moved up back from Friday because of weather. The qualifications were all jacked up because the medical helicopter couldn't get in place. But overall, what were your thoughts about the day up leading up to the race? We'll get into the race here in just a minute.
I think the week for IndyCar was kind of I don't know what the term is, maybe odd, maybe not the best pub. You obviously had the Long Beach push to pass incident to where last Tuesday they released the 12 drivers' names, which is half of the field that used the push to pass, how many times they used it on the restart. So IndyCar forgot to basically hit the switch to turn it off on a restart. You're not supposed to have push to pass on a start or a restart. So half the field used it on the only restart we saw in Long Beach. Then Wednesday you come up with this AI-generated one race shirt that kind of flipped the fans upside down and flipped those that are involved in the sport and had some controversy. And then Thursday, they put us all in a room and they let us talk to the top 5 in points, and that turned into an escalation of Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward kind of going back and forth with each other about, oh, did you know that you shouldn't have used the push to pass? And
was great. And that was great yesterday when we were in the presser with that. That just carried on over to it. That was, I think the question was asked to them: did you get some clarification on this push to pass? And they were throwing Joseph Newgarden under the bus and everything. I know we got that posted on our YouTube channel as well as a lot of other people, but. Yeah, I just thought that was. I wish I would have was there for Thursday thing. But go ahead, Tony. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But yeah, that was a great. It was funny. I thought.
And then Friday you had a clean day for most of the day, and then all of a sudden this rainstorm comes in, and it really spiced up the Indy Next race. I thought it was a lot of fun. Drivers were out there in the rain, came in for tires. Enzo Fittipaldi, the grandson of two-time Indianapolis 500 winner Emerson Fittipaldi, got his first career Indy Next win, and then then they decided to cancel qualifying and move it to the next day, which I talked to many drivers while the rain was going on, and I said, what are your thoughts? And most of them said we should be out here. We shouldn't have waited to sweep the track. Now there's too many puddles. If we would have went right as the I think qualifying was at 5 o'clock, and they said if we would have went right at 5 o'clock, we would have had an opportunity to qualify. It would have been a lot of fun, and it would have spiced the race up. You might have some drivers qualifying up towards the front that wouldn't normally be there. Maybe some drivers qualifying towards the back that maybe normally wouldn't be in the back, and really spice up a race that has kind of been, for the lack of a better term, boring over the last couple of years. It's been plain and green, not a lot of yellows. But nonetheless, as we learned yesterday, it didn't matter because what we thought was boring turned out to be one whale of a race. And then, it was cool to see Dan's youngest son, Oliver, racing out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He tested a few weeks ago out there. His older brother, Sebastian, is on his way to go overseas to run some F3 with Prema. Sebastian has gotten kind of a taste of what it looks like on the Formula One side of things, and I think that's the path that he wants to go down. And then on Oliver's side, Oliver really enjoys the American side and being stateside, and I think he certainly wants to move up through the USF 2000 ladder, find himself at Indy Next, and ultimately, in an IndyCar ride and running in the Indianapolis 500.
I want to pause there for just a second to talk about Oliver and Sebastian. We've watched them grow up, and just what an amazing journey that IndyCar and the entire racing community has given them. everybody knows that what happened with Dan Weldon and Lionheart, and one of the greatest of all times, and just really was a sad time in the history of IndyCar. So to see them out and to see his son get the podium at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you got to think that Dan Weldon is looking down and saying, "That's my boy." Isn't that just a great feel-good story for the race, for the series, and to see those two boys that grow up into the ranks that they've grown up into?
Yeah, I think, and it's somebody who knows Susie as well as I do. I think you get to a point as a mother, and obviously we talked about it being Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. But I think, you get to a point where your sons, they get curious about what their dad did and the legacy that their dad left. And, the impact not only that Dan made on the results of IndyCar, and his results speak for themselves with the championship and 2 Indianapolis 500 wins. And, your sons are going to get curious about how he got there and what it took to get there, and following in that path. And as a mother, you lost your husband doing what your kids want to do. How do you balance that? How do you,
right?
That's a very tough situation, and you kind of got to let, the boys do what they naturally are drawn to. And, I think they probably feel the closest to their father when they're in a race car.
I bet. Yeah.
And you look at, growing up without a father, and just a difficulty that, millions of people probably go through every day with that. But, also, it's like you want to step out of the shadows a little bit, because that you want to put your own legacy down. And it's the same thing that Marco Andretti and Graham Rahal went through and kind of struggled with. I mean, if you think about drivers with famous fathers that were successful in IndyCar, I mean, the Unzers obviously come to mind, but, there's a lot there's more that just didn't work out, right? Everybody remembers Al Unser Jr. and winning 2 Indianapolis 500s, but, a lot of people forget that his son, Al III, tried to run, Indy next, and it didn't work out. Marco Andretti obviously had an up and down career. Graham Rahal's had an up and down career. Ari Leyendijk Jr., people forget, ran 1 Indianapolis 500 back in 2006. And it is a difficult and immense amount of pressure to always be compared to your father, who did major things. So, it's great to see them. It's great to see them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There's an odd piece, I think, it's seeing that, right? It's not a closing of a chapter. It's the writing of the next chapter.
Absolutely.
And the hand down and the pass down of what those boys can do, and the legacy that their father left, and ultimately cost him his life on that day in 2011 in Las Vegas.
Yes, and it's a day that I think everybody will remember, and I certainly remember that myself. So I just thought it was an exciting time to see them racing and seeing them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Well, let's get into the Grand Prix, the Sonsios, and I probably said that, the Sonsio Grand Prix. Alex Palou on the pole. Exciting time to watch that. It was fun to watch that carryover from Thursday into Friday in the presser, and just watching them just kind of have a comical banner between the two of them, and it was just absolutely hilarious. But it just does go to show, as we go on and we get into the race, there's got to be some clarifications. And I'll ask you this question when we move on: what does race control, Doug Bowles, IndyCar, all the leadership of people that decide these things got to do to figure this out? It's a push to pass. To me, in theory, it's not that hard, but it seems like IndyCar, not the drivers, have made it harder than it needs to be. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, luckily in the race itself yesterday, we really didn't have any push to pass incidents or anything. They obviously changed the rule that you're allowed to use it pretty much whenever you want to use it, except for the initial start. I think the biggest thing yesterday was, we talked about a year and a half ago, of keeping Honda around and keeping Honda in the fold. And Chevy's not going to be able to supply the entire field with engines, and you need to have that engine competition. And one of the things that Honda wanted was the hybrid, and they wanted the hybrid unit, and it added an extra 100 pounds onto the back of the car, which has not been good. And I think I've told you this. I've said it on my own podcast. It's like the hybrid is like an offensive lineman, right? When you're talking about it, it's normally not good. When you're talking about an offensive lineman, it's usually a false start or a hold. And when you're talking about the hybrid, you're usually talking about it failing or not doing its job or costing a driver a run. We saw it happen to Marcus Ericsson at Long Beach. And then yesterday, Alexander Rossi's hybrid fails, coming off the final corner down the straightaway. And the car stops literally right under the flag stand. They throw a yellow with an IndyCar race control. Well, the yellow was thrown immediately on the flag stand.
The full course car,
and it was a local yellow, which I've never seen a local yellow on the main straightaway on the road course. And then Rossi's about out of his car as the field is still going by at about 170 miles an hour. So. That was a tough look, and it just seems like race control continues to shoot themselves in the foot. And where's the ownership? Where's the responsibility for it? Like, somebody needs to talk. Somebody needs to come out and say, this is why we didn't throw the yellow. And it's because, they wanted to allow the leaders to come in and cycle through on their pit stops. Well, that's bullshit. It's about safety. It's about a driver and a car are sat idle on the main straightaway as cars fly by at 170 miles an hour. You shouldn't wait to throw the yellow just so that the leaders can cycle through. If the leaders get caught out and there's a yellow, that's the risk you take in staying out. That's the risk of racing, where at any point, no matter what, a yellow flag can come out. So I wasn't happy with that decision. Obviously, Alexander Rossi wasn't as well. This is not the first time that this has happened. You go back to Thermal a couple of years ago with Marcus Ericsson. I think there was another incident at Barber with Grosjean about 4 or 5 years ago. So I didn't like the call for the yellow. Obviously, you had the major pile up on lap one that really spiced up the field.
What a crazy cluster.
And moved some drivers in the back. And then, later on in the race, Felix Rosenqvist decides that he didn't hit half the field, so he wanted to try to get the rest of them. And, he got his car off the ground and ended up bringing out another yellow. And ultimately, David Malukas and Christian Lundgaard had a nice battle to the finish. It was an awesome pass from Lundgaard to win the Indianapolis 500, to win the Indy GP and set himself up to possibly win his first Indianapolis 500.
Did you just make a prophetic saying? I don't know, maybe. But we'll get into that here. We got plenty of time to talk about the Indianapolis 500. It was a nice race to watch, but I think everybody thought, okay, Alex Palou, and you and I joked in the media center there that I said, who do you got today's race? You go like, who do I think is second? I think everybody thought, well, this is just Alex Palou's thing. He's just here to do, and it didn't happen that way. Good win though for Christian Lundgaard, and then David Malukas. What a great fight they had, and I was really excited to see Graham Rahal on the podium as well. Alex Palou, kind of a disappointment, as you mentioned, Felix Rosenqvist. I mean, he was kind of all over the field, and he went airborne, and and then there was an issue with Stingray Robb hitting him, so it was a whole mess. But at that first turn, if we call it turn 4, the hairpin right at the very beginning, the start finish. I mean, it's like predicting the weather sometimes. It's going to happen. It's just who's going to get involved in it and who's going to get around it. So that can shape the entire race. And, I think at one point, Melissa and I were saying, I think there might only be 10 drivers left at the end of this race. So it was a lot of cautions. A lot of things happened yesterday. But it was a good win. And as we get strapped in and get ready, no pun intended, as we get strapped in and get ready for the Indianapolis 500, so we can move our conversations to that. Obviously, nothing going on the track right now because they are converting that road course back to an oval course for the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500. It was nice and weird to see Will Power out there in a different car, in a different fire suit. So that was kind of different. But it's always good to see these drivers come back and to see the rookies get together as well. Any final takes on the Sonsio Grand Prix, and we'll go ahead and start our conversation about the Indy 500. And then I do want to talk with you about our beloved or unbeloved or unluckiest Pacers. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a good win for Christian Lundgaard. This was a driver that's been so good at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. This is a driver that has been on the podium and qualified on the front row at the IMS road course, and we'd been waiting for him to break through and get a victory for Arrow McLaren, and it finally happened. Lundgaard's a quiet, confident driver who has really good racecraft in Indianapolis 500 over the last couple of years. And I'm excited to see what he can do for the 500. I'm excited to see the momentum that McLaren has. Obviously, Pato O'Ward did not have a good day, but he did qualify on the front row. He's been up there all season long. He's in the top 6 in points for the 500. And ultimately, Nolan Siegel, who, everybody's talked about and the scrutiny around him of, hey, you got to perform or you're out. He's had a couple consecutive top 12 finishes, and I think that he's going to carry some momentum. And then, by the way, this team gets Ryan Hunter-Reay added to the fold for the upcoming month of May and as their 4th driver in that stable. So overall, really good weekend. I'm never going to complain when we have some controversy or we have a fight on pit road as we did yesterday.
I saw that tweet that Marshall posted out. Yeah. He's like, the crew chief, the reason to hire a crew chief is likely Jimmy Looper, who also serves as a head of security for his car and peacekeeper for a driver. Good to see Ramon throttle back. That was Marshall Pruitt's tweet. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, it was nice for me to be right there and get my 500,000 views off of it too. So it was interesting. But yeah, I love it. Overall, really good day, I thought, and looking forward to the next couple of days for practice for the 500.
Well, great job for Christian Lundgaard. He said in the post-race conference that he really didn't expect to win. Yeah. So great for him. But, now we look ahead into the Indy 500 and his Arrow McLaren with Christian Lundgaard. He was previously liked to do well at the Indy 500, but I think after his commanding road course win proves that he has at least the raw speed, likely shortening his oval odds significantly. I think that I joked, I said, did you just make a prophetic speak when you said Christian Lundgaard for the Indy 500? But it's really not out of the conversation. Of course, Alex Bellow and David Malukas, Joseph Newgarden are all people we're going to be talking about over the next week or so, certainly as we go into qualifying. There is no bump, so that's a good thing. But go ahead.
I think you're looking at 6 or 7 drivers that have an opportunity to win the Indianapolis 500. I think you have to put Lundgaard in there right now. He's had good racecraft. That car underneath him is going to be enough to be there at the end. As obviously Pato O'Ward has fought out for the win over the last 5 or 6 years at Indy. So I think you're looking at 6, 7, maybe even 8 drivers, depending on how the wind blows and the strategy and things being changed up. But it's going to be exciting when, as you mentioned, there's no bumping. So practice is going to be super important because everybody's going to be focused solely on their race trim for most of the practice days.
We're really excited to get in it. We'll be out there at the media center next weekend as we get in for qualifying and as we get ready for the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500. Nothing's better, nothing's bigger to me, and I'm really excited to be out there, and it's always good to see you out there, Tony. Let's talk a little bit about what just happened with the Pacers right before you and I jumped on here to record this segment on a Sunday afternoon with the lottery. And I think I was talking with you a little bit off mic. The Pacers is probably the unluckiest team in the NBA. Of course, we had the issue with Tyrese Halliburton running any chance of winning a title in Indiana. And then they had the number 1 pick from the NBA draft, and then somehow that got all screwed up and, got traded. So overall, I mean, let the hot takes begin. The Pacers in this lottery, this NBA lottery, I think overall is just a bunch of hogwash, if you want. We got to figure something out better, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's the risk you took, though, as a franchise who decided to tank, and obviously that pissed off the NBA because now they have anti-tanking rules. I think you look at that was a risk you took to get Ivan Zubac, and then you lost a bunch of games. And, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, including myself, that, the NBA just didn't want another Pacers, Oklahoma City.
I don't agree. I don't disagree.
But, it seemed a little fishy. It seemed a little sketchy. And, the Pacers really set themselves back. So, Ivan Zubac, no pressure, my guy, but you're going to have it's time to turn into Wilt Chamberlain.
Well, if you give up a top 5 pick in a loaded draft to get Zubac or whatever, and you're right, the pressure's on him. I don't know what's worse, that or giving up 2 firsts for Sauce Gardner with the Colts.
Well,
there's that comparison, right?
Yeah, if I went to bed tonight and I woke up tomorrow and both GMs of the Pacers and the Colts were fired, I'd be like, you know what? Well, that's deserving, and I'm okay with it.
Well, we'll just see what happens and how they can piece all of this together. Indiana hasn't picked in the top 5 in the draft since 1988 when they drafted Rick Smits. You were just a little young at that time, I think, Tony. I was a freshman in college, so.
There you go.
Well, Tony, we appreciate you jumping on with us on a Sunday afternoon. Always good catching up with you out at the track, and good to see your show growing. And I think I told you that yesterday. I really am impressed with how you guys have been, just how you guys have gotten better over the last year or so. So I encourage anybody and everybody to go and check you out. But what are you guys working on, and how can people find your work and masterpieces, sir?
Yep, it'll be a big week with practice. My Instagram, TDIndy24, is a great place to go. Facebook links there. Unverified on Tuesday. We'll kind of preview the Indianapolis 500, and then it's going to be a big week. This time next Sunday, we should be pretty close to having a pole winner and the field of 33 set for the Indianapolis 500, and I'm absolutely looking forward to it.
Are you prepared to give us a prediction for a pole setter? Do we think it's the usual suspect, or do we think somebody's going to surprise us throughout this week and in practicing and qualifying and sneaking into the Fast Six that we really weren't talking about that might eke out a pole?
Yeah, I think what people don't realize about pole weekend and qualifying for the 500 is just how much the track can change with some cloud covering. How important it is to go out in one of those first 5 or 6 positions. You look at Marcus Ericsson last year, who really didn't have top 10 qualifying pace throughout that Friday practice when they gave the extra horse and the extra horsepower and the extra boost to the drivers. But he drew the number 1 overall spot to go out first, and it was cloudy. It was a little under. There was a cold. It was a cooler track. It wasn't as warm. The car was ready to go. And he ended up putting it inside the top 12, ultimately qualifying 9th. So there's so many factors that can change a race car and the balance of a race car over a 4-lap qualifying run where you're absolutely trimmed out. It's the lightest the car is going to be throughout the entire month of May. You're as close to the edge as you'll be over the entire season on any session. So it's intense. It's exciting. And we'll see if more teams and more drivers are amped to take risk and go for the pole and move themselves up, knowing that there's really, there's not going to be a chance that they get bumped out of the field because there's only going to be 33 entries.
All right, Tony, we appreciate talking with you. I hope you have a good week, and we'll catch up with you next weekend down at the track.
We'll see you there. Hope for good weather.
Yeah, buddy. We'll see you.